Mirage of Trust. Rachel Bennett sipped her coffee, watching the autumn leaves dance outside the cafe window. At 31, she'd built a life she was proud of, successful career as an interior designer, close-knit group of friends, and a relationship with Nolan Parker that had just celebrated its 3rd anniversary. "Earth to Rachel!" Zoe Martinez waved her hand in front of Rachel's face, her silver bracelets jingling. "Where did you go just now?" Rachel smiled at her best friend of 15 years. "Just thinking about how perfect everything is right now." "Perfect?" Nolan returned to their table with a refill. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the wind outside. "I'd say we're pretty damn close." He squeezed Rachel's shoulder affectionately. This was their Sunday ritual, brunch at Cafe Lumen, followed by a walk through Riverside Park. Rachel treasured these moments with the 2 people she loved most. Zoe had been her rock since college, the sister she never had. And Nolan, charming, ambitious Nolan, had swept into her life 3 years ago during a charity auction where they'd both bid on the same painting. "So the housewarming party next weekend?" Rachel said, pulling out her phone to check her notes. "I think we're at about 30 guests now," Nolan grimaced. "Do we really need that many people trampling through our new place?" "It's not that many," Zoe interjected, her eyes meeting Nolan's briefly. "Besides, everyone wants to see the amazing renovation Rachel's been slaving over." Rachel beamed with pride. The downtown loft she and Nolan had purchased was her biggest personal project yet. She'd poured her heart into transforming the industrial space into a warm home. "Speaking of which," Zoe continued, checking her watch, "I should get going. I promised to help my sister with wedding preparations." She gathered her things, leaning down to kiss Rachel's cheek. "Text you later?" "Of course," Rachel replied, watching as Zoe hugged Nolan goodbye, perhaps holding on a moment longer than necessary. After Zoe left, Rachel and Nolan lingered, discussing final touches for the housewarming. His phone buzzed continuously on the table. "Popular today?" Rachel asked lightly. "Work stuff," he replied, turning the phone face down. "The Morrison account is being difficult." Later that evening, Rachel was arranging books on their new shelves when Nolan emerged from the shower. "Hey, I forgot to mention I have to go to Philadelphia for a client meeting on Tuesday. Probably an overnight." "Again?" Rachel frowned. "That's the 3rd time this month." "Nature of the business, babe. Clients want FaceTime." He kissed her forehead. "It's just one night." That night, Rachel woke around 2 a.m., reaching for Nolan only to find his side of the bed empty. Slipping out of bed, she padded quietly down the hallway. In the dim light of the kitchen, she saw Nolan's silhouette, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. I know, he whispered. "I miss you too. It's complicated right now." Rachel froze, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. She retreated silently to bed, pretending to be asleep when Nolan returned minutes later. The next morning, she scrolled through her messages with Zoe, noticing how her best friend had been unusually busy lately, canceling plans, being vague about her weekend activities. Rachel had always prided herself on her intuition, and now it was screaming at her that something was wrong. At work, her colleague James noticed her distraction. "Rough morning?" he asked, placing a cup of her favorite tea on her desk. "Just tired," Rachel replied, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "If you need to talk, I'm around," he offered with a gentle smile that reached his kind eyes. Rachel nodded, turning back to her computer screen. The perfect life she'd been admiring just yesterday suddenly felt like a house of cards, trembling with each new doubt that crept into her mind, whispers in the dark. The suspicion that had taken root in Rachel's mind grew steadily over the next 2 weeks. Small details she might have once overlooked now seemed glaringly obvious. Nolan's increased business trips, Zoe's sudden unavailability on those same evenings, and the way conversations stopped abruptly when she entered a room. "I'm probably being paranoid," Rachel murmured to herself as she sorted through mail in their kitchen. The housewarming had been a success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Nolan and Zoe. Their casual touches, lingering glances, and inside jokes felt weighted with meaning she couldn't access. Her phone chimed with a text from James. "Client loved your concept boards. We got the Riverfront project. A smile broke across her face, the first genuine one in days. She quickly typed back, "That's incredible news. Celebratory lunch?" "Absolutely," came the swift reply. "Trattoria at 1? At lunch, James noticed her preoccupation immediately. "Okay, what's going on?" "You just won your dream project, and you're staring at your pasta like it personally offended you." Rachel hesitated, then decided she needed to voice her concerns aloud. "Have you ever had a feeling that something was wrong, but everyone tells you everything's fine?" James set down his fork. "All the time. What's really bothering you, Rachel?" "I think," she lowered her voice, "I think Nolan might be cheating on me. With Zoe." James's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's a serious suspicion." "What makes you think that?" Rachel detailed the late-night calls, the coincidental scheduling, and the subtle changes in behavior. "Last night, I saw a text notification on his phone from Zoe that said, 'Can't wait for tomorrow.' Same place? And when I asked Nolan about his plans, he said he had a business dinner." "Have you asked Zoe about it?" "She claims she was having dinner with a new guy she's dating. But she wouldn't tell me his name or anything about him." Rachel pushed her plate away. "I've known Zoe for 15 years. She tells me everything about her dating life. Everything." James reached across the table, briefly touching her hand. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront them, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm ruining relationships over nothing? And if you're right?" Rachel stared out the window. "Then I lose the two people I trust most in the world at once." That evening, Rachel decided to test her theory. "I was thinking of surprising Zoe with concert tickets for her birthday next month," she mentioned casually as Nolan scrolled through his phone. "Hmm?" He glanced up, distracted. "Oh, she'd love that. What band should I get tickets for?" She mentioned someone new she was into. Nolan froze momentarily. "Actually, I think she's more into jazz these days. She mentioned it the other day." Rachel's stomach tightened. Zoe hated jazz, a fact Nolan should have known after 3 years. But more importantly, how did he know Zoe's current music preferences when Rachel herself didn't? The following day, Rachel left work early, claiming a headache. Instead, she drove to the hotel where Nolan had mentioned his business dinner would take place. She felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, sitting in her car in the parking lot watching the entrance. At 6:30 p.m., her heart nearly stopped. There was Nolan opening the passenger door of his car for Zoe, who emerged wearing a dress Rachel had never seen before. They didn't kiss or hold hands, nothing so obvious, but the intimacy between them was unmistakable as they walked into the hotel, Nolan's hand resting lightly on the small of Zoe's back. Rachel's vision blurred with tears. She'd hoped desperately to be wrong. Driving home in a daze, she struggled to process what she'd seen. By the time she reached their loft, a cold clarity had replaced her initial shock. She needed more than what she'd witnessed. She needed undeniable proof. That night, when Nolan returned home smelling of unfamiliar cologne, Rachel pretended to be asleep. After his breathing deepened into slumber, she carefully took his phone from the nightstand and entered his password. Her birthday, a fact that now seemed cruelly ironic. The text messages between Nolan and Zoe told the story she'd feared. Months of secret meetings, plans carefully orchestrated around Rachel's schedule, and intimate conversations that revealed a relationship far beyond friendship. What hurt most weren't the romantic messages, but the casual discussions about Rachel herself, how to keep her from suspecting, how clueless she seemed. Rachel returned the phone exactly as she'd found it and slipped back under the covers, her mind racing. Their anniversary dinner was in 3 days, a celebration with close friends at an upscale restaurant downtown, the perfect setting for the truth to finally come to light. Unveiling deception. 3 days passed in a blur as Rachel maintained a perfect facade of normalcy. She smiled at Nolan's anniversary gift, a delicate necklace that now felt like a collar of deceit. She thanked Zoe for her effusive congratulatory text message, knowing it was laced with hypocrisy. Inside, Rachel was calculating, planning, preparing for what would come next. Each night after Nolan fell asleep, she forwarded key messages from his phone to herself, building an irrefutable case. During lunch breaks, she confided in James, who listened without judgment. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" he asked gently after hearing her plan. "Public confrontations can get messy." "I've been humiliated privately for months," Rachel replied, a new hardness in her voice. "I'm done protecting their feelings." The evening of the anniversary dinner arrived, and Rachel dressed with particular care, a crimson dress that made her feel powerful, her hair swept up to reveal the necklace Nolan had given her. Watching him adjust his tie in the mirror, she wondered how he could look her in the eyes knowing what he'd done. "You look stunning," he said, kissing her cheek. "Thank you," she replied evenly. "Tonight will certainly be memorable." The restaurant was elegant. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, and intimate circular booths. Their friends had already arrived. Zoe, of course, looking slightly nervous. Marcus and Elise, a couple they'd known since college. Nolan's brother Ryan and his wife. And James, whom Rachel had invited at the last minute, claiming she wanted to celebrate their project success alongside their anniversary. Nolan had raised an eyebrow at James's inclusion, but hadn't objected. Zoe, however, had given Rachel a strange look when she saw him. Champagne flowed as they ordered appetizers. Rachel played her part perfectly, the happy girlfriend celebrating 3 years with the man she loved. When Ryan proposed a toast to the couple, she raised her glass with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "To Rachel and Nolan," Ryan said. "May your honesty and trust in each other continue to be the foundation of your relationship." Rachel caught Zoe's gaze across the table. Her best friend quickly looked away, reaching for her water glass with a slightly trembling hand. "Speaking of honesty," Rachel said, setting down her champagne, "I'd like to share something with everyone." She reached into her purse and placed her phone on the table. "I've been reflecting lately on what makes a relationship work, not just romantic relationships, but friendships too." Nolan smiled uncertainly. "Babe, maybe save the speech for after dinner?" "This can't wait," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You see, I've always believed that loyalty and honesty are non-negotiable. Wouldn't you agree, Zoe?" Zoe shifted uncomfortably. "Of course. And you, Nolan? You've always said trust is everything, right?" His smile faltered. "Rachel, what's going on?" "It's quite simple," she said, unlocking her phone. "I've discovered that the 2 people I trusted most have been lying to me." For months, the table fell silent. Elise glanced nervously between them. James sat back, a supportive presence in Rachel's peripheral vision. "I don't know what you're talking about," Zoe began, but Rachel cut her off. "No more lies, please." She turned to their friends. "Nolan and Zoe have been having an affair. They've been meeting in hotels while telling me they were elsewhere. They've been exchanging messages, hundreds of them, planning their deception." Nolan reached for her arm. "Rachel, you're making a scene. Would you prefer I read some of these messages aloud?" Rachel asked, her voice dangerously calm. "The ones where you discuss how to keep me in the dark? Or perhaps the ones where you mock how trusting I am?" The color drained from both Nolan and Zoe's faces. Around them, the other diners had fallen silent, watching the drama unfold. "I trusted you both with everything," Rachel continued, standing now. "And this is how you repaid that trust." She placed the necklace Nolan had given her on the table. "I deserve better than lies. I deserve better than both of you." As Rachel walked out of the restaurant, head held high despite the tears threatening to spill, she heard James's chair scrape back as he followed her. Behind them, accusations and denials erupted at the table, the first honest conversation that table had seen all evening. Outside, in the cool night air, Rachel finally let the tears fall. James stood beside her, offering silent support. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. Rachel watched through the restaurant window as her former life imploded. "Yes," she whispered. "The truth always is." The truth exposed. The aftermath of the restaurant confrontation unfolded like a storm, violent, cleansing, and ultimately transformative. Standing on the sidewalk with James, Rachel had expected to feel devastated. Instead, she felt an unexpected lightness, as if setting down a burden she'd carried for too long. "Do you need a ride home?" James asked gently, his breath fogging in the cool evening air. Rachel shook her head. "I can't go back to the loft tonight." "You can stay at my place," he offered. "Guest room is all yours, no questions asked." Behind them, the restaurant door burst open. Nolan emerged, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Rachel!" he called, striding toward them. "You had no right to humiliate us like that." James stepped forward protectively, but Rachel placed a hand on his arm. "I had every right," she replied, her voice steady despite her tear-streaked face. "You lost the privilege of my discretion when you betrayed my trust." Zoe appeared behind Nolan, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Rachel, please, we never meant to hurt you. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen," Rachel said. "They happen through choices. Hundreds of small, selfish choices you both made every day for months." Nolan ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "Look, we made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But did you have to tell everyone? Did you have to make a spectacle? Did you have to lie to my face every day?" Rachel countered. "Did you have to discuss me behind my back, laughing at how clueless I was?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a specific message. "Should I read what you wrote, Nolan? About how convenient it was that I trusted you both so completely?" Zoe stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Rachel." "You're my best friend." "Was," Rachel corrected. "You were my best friend." 15 years, Zoe. 15 years of sharing everything, of being there for each other through every heartbreak and triumph. And you threw it away for what? Secret hotel meetings and the thrill of deceiving me? A small crowd had gathered from the restaurant, including their friends who watched in shocked silence. "You don't understand," Nolan began. "We didn't plan this. We developed feelings." "Stop!" Rachel held up her hand. "I don't care about your justifications. What I care about is that instead of being honest, instead of having the decency to tell me, you chose deception. That's what I can't forgive." James touched Rachel's shoulder. "Your Uber's here," he said quietly, nodding toward the black car pulling up to the curb. Rachel gathered herself, taking a deep breath. "I'll be sending movers for my things tomorrow, Nolan. I suggest you not be there." As she turned to leave, Zoe called after her. "Rachel, please, we need to talk about this." Rachel paused, looking back at her former best friend. "There's nothing left to say. You both made your choice. Now I'm making mine." In the back seat of the Uber, Rachel finally allowed herself to fully feel the magnitude of what had happened. Her relationship, her home, her oldest friendship, all gone in a single evening. She texted her sister, briefly explaining the situation and asking if she could stay with her for a few days. The next morning, Rachel awoke on her sister Mia's couch to dozens of messages, concerned friends offering support, Nolan alternating between apologies and accusations, Zoe's desperate pleas for forgiveness. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the practical matters of rebuilding her life. James arrived at noon to help her pack her essentials from the loft. Thankfully, Nolan wasn't there. "The office grapevine is buzzing," James mentioned as they carefully wrapped her collection of vintage art prints. "Everyone's on your side, by the way." Rachel managed a small smile. "I wasn't aware there were sides." "There are always sides when something like this happens. And nobody likes a cheater, or two cheaters. In this case." As they boxed up her belongings, Rachel found herself drawn to items that represented her independent self. Books she'd loved before Nolan, art she'd created, photographs from trips she'd taken alone. She left behind anything that reminded her of their relationship. "You're not taking much," James observed as they loaded the last box into his car. "I'm taking everything that matters," Rachel replied. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Marcus, Nolan's best friend since college. "I know we've never been close," his message read, "but what Nolan and Zoe did was wrong. If you need anything, Lisa and I are here." In that moment, surrounded by boxes in her sister's guest room, Rachel realized something profound. She hadn't lost her entire world, only the parts that had been built on lies. And perhaps that was a necessary clearing of ground for something new and honest to grow. Rebuilding from Ashes Spring arrived with a tentative sense of renewal. 4 months had passed since the night at the restaurant, and Rachel had slowly reassembled the pieces of her life into something new, something entirely her own. She sat, On the balcony of her new apartment, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood come alive below. The one-bedroom in the arts district cost more than she'd planned to spend, but the morning light that flooded the space made it perfect for her painting, a hobby she'd neglected during her years with Nolan, but had rediscovered with passion. Her phone chimed with a message from James. "Studio visit at 11 still good? Bringing coffee and those almond croissants you pretend not to love?" Rachel smiled as she typed her reply. In the months following her breakup, James had become an unexpected constant in her life. What had begun as collegial support had evolved into a friendship she treasured, one built on genuine respect and honesty. The riverfront project they'd won together was now in its final phase, and Rachel's reputation had soared with its success. She'd been promoted to senior designer, and rumors circulated that she might be offered a partnership by year's end. Her intercom buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. On the security screen, she saw a familiar face she hadn't expected, Zoe, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Rachel hesitated, her finger hovering over the button. She hadn't spoken to Zoe since that night, though not for lack of trying on Zoe's part. Dozens of messages, emails, even a handwritten letter had all gone unanswered. After a long moment, Rachel pressed the button. "Come up." Minutes later, Zoe stood awkwardly in Rachel's living room, taking in the space, so different from the industrial loft Rachel had shared with Nolan. This apartment was undeniably Rachel, colorful, artistic, with no trace of compromise. "This is nice," Zoe said quietly. "It suits you." "Why are you here?" Rachel asked, maintaining a careful distance. Zoe sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "I'm moving to Seattle next week. Job offer I couldn't refuse." She paused. "I couldn't leave without seeing you one more time." Rachel crossed her arms. "What do you want from me, Zoe? Forgiveness? Closure? Because I'm not sure I have either to give." "I don't know," Zoe admitted. "Maybe just for you to hear me when I say how sorry I am. Not just for the affair, but for being a coward, for not valuing our friendship enough to be honest with you." "And Nolan?" "Over months ago, it was never." Zoe looked down. "It wasn't what either of us thought it was." Rachel felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for her former friend. "Was it worth it?" she asked, echoing the question James had posed to her that night. Tears filled Zoe's eyes. "Not for a second. I lost the best friend I've ever had." They talked for nearly an hour, not the easy, flowing conversation of their former friendship, but something more measured and honest. Rachel didn't offer forgiveness, but she found herself unwilling to send Zoe to Seattle carrying the full weight of their broken friendship. "I hope you find what you're looking for there," Rachel said finally, as she walked Zoe to the door. "I hope you found what you need here," Zoe replied, glancing around the apartment that so clearly represented Rachel's new beginning. After Zoe left, Rachel stood at the window, watching her former best friend disappear down the street. The day encounter had stirred emotions she thought she'd processed, but instead of the expected pain, she felt something like peace, a closing of one chapter that allowed another to begin. When James arrived an hour later, he immediately sensed something had changed. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down the promised coffee and pastries. "Zoe came by," Rachel replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "She's moving to Seattle." James raised his eyebrows. "And how do you feel about that?" "Lighter," Rachel admitted. "Like I can finally put it all behind me." She took a sip of coffee. "I've been holding on to anger I didn't even realize was there." They spent the morning reviewing the final details for the riverfront presentation. Working side by side, Rachel found herself noticing things about James she'd always seen but never fully acknowledged. His thoughtfulness, the quiet confidence behind his creativity, the way his smile reached his eyes. As they finished, gathering their materials to head to the office, James hesitated. "I've been wanting to ask you something," he said, uncharacteristically nervous. "Would you want to have dinner with me? Not as colleagues, as something else. Rachel felt a flutter of surprise, followed by warmth. For months, James had been nothing but supportive, never pushing, never rushing her healing process. "I'd like that," she said softly. "But I should warn you, I'm still figuring out who I am on my own." James smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are, Rachel. That's the person I've come to care about." That evening, walking into the small Italian restaurant where James waited, Rachel felt a sense of cautious optimism. She wasn't the same woman who had once built her life around Nolan and Zoe. The betrayal had broken her, yes, but in rebuilding, she had discovered parts of herself that had been overshadowed: her independence, her creativity, her resilience. As James stood to greet her, Rachel recognized that what made this different, what made it feel right, wasn't passion or excitement or any of the things she'd mistaken for love before. It was something steadier: mutual respect, genuine understanding, and the foundation of truth they'd already built together. "Ready for this?" James asked as she sat across from him, a new kind of smile playing at his lips. Rachel thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: the pain, the growth, the rediscovery of herself. "Yes," she said with quiet certainty. "I think I am." The restaurant buzzed with conversation around them, but in their corner, a different story was beginning, one built not from the ashes of betrayal, but from the authentic connection of two people who had found each other when they weren't looking. And for the first time in a very long time, Rachel felt that the best chapters of her story were yet to be written.